So I just wanted to engage with something that a guy called Aaron Edwards has written. Aaron is a theologian, I think, primarily in the areas of ethics and missiology and that kind of thing. He taught at Cliff College, and then was essentially forced out. He was dismissed. You can go and look in the news media or check his own website to hear a bit of his story. I believe that, I would say, I think the dismissal was unfair. I'll say that openly here. And I say that not because I agree with everything Aaron has ever said or done, or even agree with the way that he said or did things in a particular context there. But that's not the problem. I'm just trying to give you a bit of background here. And Aaron is now engaging as a theologian, not in Bible colleges, but just out in the public realm, using his Substack site, which is called The Good Fight, his blog, using social media, using podcasts. He's got his own Good Fight podcast. He's also part of a podcast with Andy Bannister called Pod of the Gaps Meet Play There, which is primarily, I think, around sort of apologetics and that kind of thing. And a friend of mine, another friend of mine, used to be on the team, on the panel for that podcast, which is how I first became aware of Aaron and his work. And by the way, I just want to say, I think what he seeks to do in terms of that public engagement is one of the things that I want to see theologians doing. So that is fantastic. And what I would say is, you may not agree with everything he says. You may not agree with much or even anything he says. But actually, in terms of something to stimulate and get you thinking, if you want to engage with a theologian that's intentionally interacting at the popular level, so that you haven't got to get your own theology degree and masters and PhD before you can understand and interact with him, then actually he's a good person to start to follow and have a read of and see what he's saying and engage with it. I get the impression that Aaron loves, I could be wrong about him, but I get the impression that he loves robust back and forth and challenges as well. I think he certainly prefers it head on than sort of someone just going and complaining about it. I should say at this time that there are other people who whilst I'm giving a shout out to those kind of more sort of theological sort of blogs and podcasts, I would encourage you to have a look at Andrew Wilson's Think Theology and Ian Paul's Sexio website. I probably would have less in common with Ian on a lot of theological issues, but as a New Testament scholar who spends all the time putting accessible but deep thought out stuff on his site, worth a look at too. So there you go, some shout outs. Don't forget to have a look at facebook.com as well, of course. Anyway, Aaron has responded and engaged with the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's death, something that I've responded to and engaged with myself. And he's put an article up. At some point I'll try and find a way of giving you a link, because these are rough and ready videos. It's not as easy as some other people have to do that. I'll find a way of giving you the link so you can watch, you can read it for yourself. But Aaron's argument is basically that a lot of mainstream evangelicals were quick to basically pay tribute to and seek to honour Charlie Kirk. I think there's a little bit of an edge there. Were they just trying to jump on a bandwagon and get sort of caught up in the praise of this guy and the benefits, the aftermath? But he says, look, if the reality is that if Charlie Kirk had been in one of your churches, where you were an elder, where you were a church leader, you probably would have found him difficult. And you would have been having conversations with him. And then he gives this kind of set of a conversation where basically the elder's saying, oh, really appreciate you, really love you, Charlie. It's really good that you want to engage with people, but you're a bit right wing. And the way that you say some things, it's upsetting some of the women in the church. And maybe you're being a bit too political, and maybe you're not being gentle enough, and that kind of thing. Basically, he's saying that we would try to disciple out, or even discipline out, even excommunicate them, missing out on the fact that the things that we pay tribute to were possible because of how he was and what he said and what he did. And I thought it's worth responding to that. And I want to respond to that because, first of all, I'm an elder in a church. Secondly, I'm an elder in a church who, when Charlie Kirk died, did say, look, here's someone who's a brother in Christ, and here are some of the good things that we should recognise. Let me name them for you. Charlie Kirk was somebody who sought to let his faith influence the whole of his life, including his politics, including his work. That's clear. Secondly, Charlie Kirk was someone who used the opportunities that he had, the platform that he had, to share the gospel when he could, and you can see him doing it in his videos. Thirdly, there are quite a number of things that Charlie Kirk stood for that I agree with him on. I think most notably, he was very clear in his opposition to abortion. Other things as well. I can't remember where I'm in my new numbering, so I'm going to give up on that. So the other thing to say is Charlie Kirk, I think when you look at how he engaged with people, just the fact that he believed that the best way to deal with things was to sit down and reason it out, talk it out, to persuade other people. And part of that was, if you watch him, there's a winsomeness to that quite often. Not all the time, but probably most of the time. Because you see him, and this will surprise a lot of people, you see a gentleness. There's a frankness, there's a bluntness at times, but there's also often a gentleness. You'll see him do things like ask people, tell me your story, tell me where you're coming from. He's wanting to understand people. You will see him showing compassion and seeking to give advice that's just possibly pastoral advice to people. You might not agree with the advice he gives all the time. That is a concern that is beyond winning an argument, getting my political agenda across. So there's a whole host of things that I would commend this brother in Christ for. But I was also very open right from the off. That never mind the sort of the person from the outside saying, "Oh, you don't know this," but you would have called it, you would have met with him, you would have challenged him. I was open from the off that yes, I would have challenged him. There were things that I disagreed with Charlie Kirk on that I believe were significant and that would have touched on discipleship, so that if he was a member of our church, I would have been sitting down to talk with him about. And I want to say a couple of things about that, because actually there's nothing sinister in that. We should expect that any believer will have aspects of their life that need to be challenged. There are things in my own life that I would expect to be challenged on by my fellow elders. and indeed by church members. We want to grow in Christ. And the problem comes not when there's a need to challenge, but when there is a resistance to that. When the response to challenge and discipleship is not to either accept and listen, or to engage, to push back, to question, to challenge, to work it through, to talk it out, but rather to take offence and either to become more extravagant, more extreme, more outspoken in those kinds of areas, or to go somewhere else. But dare I say it also, we can choose to obey the advice, but resent it all the way. And what happens when we do that is that one day the issue will leak out again. So I don't see the problem. Saying, yeah, there's stuff I would have wanted as one of Aaron's pastors, one of Charlie's pastors, to talk to him about if he was part of our church. And I'd be more concerned if pastors and elders didn't want to talk to him. In fact, I would get the sense that if Charlie Kirk was part of our church, those would be good and healthy and lovely conversations. Because I think I'd get on with the guy, to be honest. I'm not sure that everybody in our church would find him easy to get on with, and that's something that we need to recognise about personalities, but also to recognise how the big core issues affect people. I'm going to come to that later. But, I'm sure there would have been amenable conversations. I'm sure that he would have disagreed and pushed back at times. I get the feeling that this is a guy who would also have listened. And I hope that there were people that were willing to disciple him and have those conversations, and that he was responding to them and being discipled. And that's the reality, is that we don't know. And I've not watched everything or listened to everything he said in chronological order. So I don't know the extent to which views changed and were modified over time. And that's the risk, isn't it, of, getting your feed, your algorithm working and giving you a whole ton of curated Charlie Kirk comments and statements that he made. I don't know, and that might be something that I might do at some point. I don't know whether on the things where I would have personally challenged him, whether he'd already been challenged and moved on those things. That's the thing, isn't it? Internet era means that things are out in the public domain, and you can't take them back. And that's a warning to us about what social media does. I remember a friend of mine preaching once, and he said to young people, remember, once you've put something on Facebook, it's there. It doesn't go away. The same for YouTube as well. Permanent, indelible record. So I think my response to Aaron would be, yeah, I would have challenged him. Yes, elders would have done. And that's healthy and that's good. And I don't think he would have had a problem with it, but I could be wrong. I don't get the impression he would. There's nothing sinister about that. There's nothing sort of woke or fluffy or liberal about it. It is just healthy church life. It's just what elders do and what elders are meant to do. And in terms of the people that he hypothetically refers to, if those kinds of people were in our church, there would have been things that we would have been challenging them on as well. Now, here's the point. I would not have had the type of conversation that Aaron suggests that people like me would have. And here's why. Aaron seems to think that the problem that we would have had with him would have been he's too blunt, or he speaks on things we're not so keen on majoring on, and that rubs people up the wrong way. And I would say two things here. First of all, if Charlie Kirk was a pastor in the church, if that was his calling, then I would be saying, yeah, Charlie, there's a political edge to the gospel, but it's not party political, and that's not your priority as a pastor. Keep your focus, preach the gospel. That's not to say you don't speak about these things, but get your priorities right. If he was there as an evangelist. But no, he was someone engaging in political life as a political pundit and influencer. That's a great place to be. So I would expect him to be talking about all of those things. And I wouldn't expect to necessarily agree with all of his political positions, or need to agree, or for the church to need to agree, or to like it. So that's not the problem. In terms of tone, look, my take on this is, my advice to most people would be yourself with a modicum of common sense. And what I mean is this: your own personality is going to affect how you approach things. And there are some obvious do's and don'ts about how we engage with other people. And my own experience is that I will get criticism from both sides. So there will be some people that think I'm too soft and gentle and fluffy and I sugarcoat things, and they wish I would be more direct and to the point. And then there are other people telling me that I'm blunt, and that leads to things being seen as combative and that kind of thing. That's the way of things. That's just the way of things. That's just how it is. So I'll be relaxed on that. But there were very specific things where I would have wanted to challenge him, and let's get to the note, the crux of it here. Let's get to the point. I've written before that some of the things that Charlie Kirk said about people, other ethnic people, like the comments about Michelle Obama and that kind of thing, were racist. And I want to be very clear about that. They were racist. Not that they've been taken out of context and misunderstood, for two reasons. One, that the way that Charlie Kirk operated was actually to create those statements that would be heard on their own, standalone, out of context, if you like. So he knew full well that what he said was going to be heard in that kind of way. And there's a responsibility for that. Secondly, because whilst his intention might have been good, I'm going to come back to that in a second, the nature of the words, the assumptions behind them, and the impact that they had in terms of creating space for others and other racist agendas meant that they were objectively racist. Now, it is important to distinguish out here. I am not saying that Charlie Kirk was a racist, partly because we don't know again where he changed and where he was challenged in his life, but also because we can't judge his heart and his heart's motives on that. What I'm saying is those things were racist. He should not have said them. And I would have been direct as an elder to Charlie Kirk, and I'll be direct as an elder to anyone and say, you should not have said that. There are things that have been said and done in this country in recent weeks in the light of the flags and the marches. And I would say they should not have been said, they should not have been done. They were racist. And that doesn't mean that I think that the people themselves, I'm not denying that they're brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm not denying that I'm not accusing them in terms of their hearts and their attitudes and how they are. I'm saying that the specific actions and words were of that nature, and therefore sin. And that's where I would have been challenging. And I think there is a possibility that, I'm going to open up the possibility that there would be some people that would talk about Charlie Kirk, both in terms of if they'd had a private conversation, but also in terms of the impression they've given, in terms of how they've talked about him online. Of, we want to talk about whether or not you're putting too much emphasis here, or whether your tone is quite right or not. And the reality is that wasn't the issue that they had. The issue they had was with, and should have been with, the specific issue of those statements that were racist. That's the real issue here. But actually, there is too much of a kind of a middle class wanting to be nice and to sort of hedge around things. Too much of a fear of offending one side or the other. And so there can be a temptation to stand back and not have the direct and crucial conversation out of fear of upsetting or offending people ourselves. And that's where I think the issue was here. And whilst we talk about Charlie Kirk, obviously he was never going to be a member in any of our churches. And he is not here now to be challenged one way or the other. But what I hope we can see is that there are some principles about how we care for people, how we pastor, how we elder people, how we disciple people in our churches, and how we ourselves respond to discipleship. And also about the nature of the public debate that we have, about being willing to be to the point and actually get to the crux of issues. Well, thanks for listening in. I'd love to hear your comments and feedback on this. Do drop them here or use facebook.com to comment.